Thanks so much. So I'll get started. Thank you so much to Oscar and John and Peter and Rachel for sharing such a compelling vision of the Institute and what it might become and what the opportunities are before us. John's notion of the Institute as a platform, a mode, and a kind of lab for helping to guide our efforts, a kind of North Star for our efforts, is a vision that I find incredibly inspiring and compelling. But I am equally compelled by the idea of the how. So how do we do this in practice? And that's why I'm delighted to be joined by this panel of participants. We have a student, Janine Ko, a recent grad, and we have faculty members and partners. And I look forward to sharing their voices and having them help to amplify some of these ideas for us. I have been here for a year now, and I have spent the majority of this year working to connect with our faculty and our students and to hear the ideas and projects that they're excited about. And three key themes are very clear to me. They've been touched on already by Oscar and Peter and John, but I'd love to underscore them here. Number one, we have an incredible group of faculty who have a variety of exciting and innovative ideas that I feel as though the Institute can provide a platform to grow, to incubate, to integrate into our program where it makes sense, and to scale them with partners and others. We also have a wonderful student body. I am meeting more and more of them every day. And from them, I feel as though they are already pursuing their passions and interests in ways that course through our program, that are adjacent to our program, and also reflect the connections between the different spheres and groups with whom they operate. And I feel as though that perspective will be key to the success of the Institute. And finally, as noted by Oscar and John and others, this place has a deep tradition of innovation, and it's exciting to be in a moment and have this opportunity to build on that with all of you. So it has certainly been a collaborative process getting to this day, and I know it will be a collaborative process going forward. So getting back to the how, the part that I am particularly excited about, we have all these ideas out on the table. What does that look like in practice? How do you translate that into reality? And so this session will really focus on that. We've got a series of interesting modes that we are starting to work with, everything from interdisciplinary work to rapid prototyping. And I hope that over the course of this discussion, we'll start to paint a picture of what the Institute is and what it can be. So I will turn to our panelists here. I hope that if you have questions, you'll raise your hand, you'll grab a mic, and you'll put them forth to us. And there'll also be time later in the session to bring those questions to the fore. So I'd love to begin with two of our faculty members, Jacques Hugon and Catherine Tousignant. They are both leading projects within the context of the Institute. I think I'll put the question to Jacques first. He was one of the early thinkers around what the Institute might be. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how it's evolved in practice over the course of this year. And it would be great to have a sketch of one of the three projects that you're working on. I'll also say that Jacques is our technology partner, so really he has his fingers and his thoughts in all sorts of projects that are emerging in the Institute.
All right, thank you, Caroline. So Peter has talked a little bit already about time as being the currency of Institute, so let me just actually speak a little bit more about that in the context also of how a faculty member would go about making a project a reality as part of the Institute. So say you are a math teacher, not a random choice here, and you're looking to basically put together a collection of math problems for your class for the next morning. And you ask yourself, you know, I'm not the first person to do this, and I really should be able to have access to a database of math problems where I can easily pick out the problems I want and put them in front of my students the next day. There are really three questions, three obstacles to getting this done. One is, does this solution already exist? Has somebody already invented this wheel? The second issue is, assuming that nobody has done this before, that I can't find the source for these problems, what is the methodology for me to actually create this database? And then the third part of it is, let's say actually that we go about and create this technology. How do I share that? How do I make sure that others get to benefit from it? And I guess the way I think about the way the Institute can function is really as an answer, if you want, or a vehicle in all three aspects of this innovation. One is kind of a filtering, a research process, if you want, whereas the faculty member may not have the time or the expertise to go out there and canvass what's going on in the math world to figure out what database is available. Then the second pillar of that is, well, let's say actually we can't find such a database that would be useful. How do we actually make this happen? Does this faculty member have the time and or expertise to actually create the technology? And again, I see the Institute as a vehicle of making this happen, connecting the faculty member with developers or developer to actually make this idea a reality. And then the third pillar for me is, let's say we actually succeed in developing this technology, how do we advocate for it? How do we make sure that not only we are sharing the technology with the other members of our department, but actually we share it on a wider basis, as that theme has already been explored, but how do we make sure that this database can be used by our sister schools, public schools, and other math educators around the world?
Thank you, Jacques. I wonder, Jacques, before you put the mic down, you have a couple of projects that you're working on. I wonder if you could give us a quick sketch of those, just to give a sense of where this notion of working within departments to create repositories and also creating connections between departments in the context of rapid prototyping.
Sure, absolutely. So there are two projects right now underway with the Institute. The first one is connected to the math department. It's basically the project that I just described, which is there are obviously a myriad of math problems stored on computers around the world right now by various educators, but it is difficult actually to find a source of problems that is well categorized, well tagged, if you want, in modern parlance, and where it is easy to integrate these problems in your curriculum. So part of one of the projects we're doing is to build such a database that would allow us to create and store and easily share a collection of math problems for a specific subject, something where you can say, tomorrow I need 10 problems on the chain rule with trigonometric functions. There are tools out there that give you part of the answer, but it is actually difficult to find a tool that gives you the exact answer and lets you do it quickly and easily and in a form that integrates well with other aspects of our teaching, as in the learning management system. So that's one project. The other project is connected to the astronomy class and the astronomy endeavors in general on this campus. And the basic idea is that our students are engaged in observing the stars and actually performing analysis to do variable star searches. By the way, that's about as far as I know about what exactly this project entails from an astronomy standpoint, so please don't ask me questions about that. But essentially the problem is that you have astronomers around the world who have data, but they don't have access to students to perform this analysis. And we have students who have access to our data, but perhaps not enough data to do all the analysis they want. Let's build a platform that connects these two constituencies together. And oh, wait, if it turns out that we have more data and more sharing available than our own students can benefit from, why don't we just eventually open this platform to other students from other schools so that they also can benefit from having access to data, especially if they're in schools, for example, who do not have the chance of having an observatory and taking their own pictures.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Catherine, I'd love to pass it over to you. So you're an instructor in the English department. Jacques has helped us to uncover a number of the early modes that we've talked about in terms of the Institute. Another key feature of the Institute is the idea of trying to support ideas in various stages of development. And I feel as though we've had an ongoing discussion about some of the ideas that are animating your project. I think it's still coming into sharper focus for you. But I would love to hear those ideas and a bit about how they connect to the wider conversations that your department is having and that's occurring in the digital humanities space.
Sure, thanks, Caroline. So my fellowship doesn't begin until December. So again, we're still in the planning stages. But what I'm interested in, my project is going to look for ways to connect meaningfully with the exciting work that's being done in the digital humanities at the college level. This was my field at the University of Virginia before I returned to Andover to teach in 1999. And over the past 20 years, the digital humanities has matured into just a really deliciously robust and mature lens for doing all kinds of interdisciplinary work. It's kind of branched out from its early days in English, kind of pioneering English departments and libraries to find really interesting roots in departments of history and sociology and linguistics, all across the board. And so one of the questions I'm interested in thinking about is, what we could and should mean when we say we teach reading and writing in the 21st century, right? So digitization of rare books and manuscripts, the visualization of complex data, the development of large-scale corpora and literary databases have all complicated what we mean when we talk about a text. And we're, in the English department, we're making intentional efforts to move beyond a traditional Western canon, and this question of what it is that we read and how we read has just been exploded by a lot of exciting new projects in undergraduate courses, but more in the scholarship that English professors are doing. Moreover, I'm interested in thinking about ways we can enrich our writing curriculum beyond things like the linear essay, the Microsoft Word document that privileges an individualistic idea of authorship or a kind of one-way analysis. And a lot of professors are experimenting with, the un-essay or collaborative writing projects, mapping, visualization, curating, all kinds of different ways to engage student interaction with texts, with each other, with networks of scholars beyond their local communities. And I think that these projects offer just a lot of great potential for engaging student imagination and getting them to shift their thinking away from production towards something more like creation, which probably would make school a little bit more fun, make it feel a little bit more humanistic, but also get them to be the generators of material that they're going to be discussing. And a lot of the interesting work that's being done by undergrads and graduate students and professors and alt-X scholars really requires a lot more time and effort and expertise than we can expect of our students. And so part of my job will be to figure out what are some interesting projects and assignments and pedagogies and components that could be scaled down or applied or dropped into our current 10th and 11th grade curriculum, or ways that they could be modified for young students. And maybe I'll end up, creating new units for some of my electives. Maybe I'll end up dreaming up a new elective. I'm not really sure exactly what's going to come out on the other end, but I'm excited to start the research.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think I'd love to come back to that great point about creation and helping our students to create and develop different voices and to stitch together material from a variety of different disciplines. And you surfaced a lot of ideas around that. I wonder if Janine, you might respond to that in some way. Janine Ko, who graduated in the spring, is now at Columbia, and I feel as though you embody a lot of those things, your work with the Philippian, your travels with the Niceworth program, and certainly some of the amazing writing you did this summer for the Institute and helping us to describe some of what we're doing there. So I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I think connected learning for me at Andover really meant making every single space a classroom, or that's kind of what I came to realize. So I was really involved with the Philippian while I was here, and then I was really involved with Niceworth. Niceworth was a very impactful experience for me. I went to Mumbai with Miss Toos and with Mr. Mundra, and it was incredible. We went to Ahmedabad, we went to the Riverside School. There were days when we were working in classrooms without AC, in like a room of 47-year-olds. And then there were days that we spent with some of the most elite students of Mumbai at this private school. And it was really about being very intentional as a student and kind of making every space a space for learning. So whether it was in the bus and we were all complaining about AC and Miss Toos would say, is that really kind of the environment that we want to encourage here? How can we get something productive out of this? And so that idea of intentionality, I think, is really key to connected learning. And then the Philippian was also a really impactful experience at Andover. Stephen Moreland said something last year, and this is something he says about he was the editor-in-chief of the Philippian my year, and he said that the Philippian is the largest, most dynamic classroom on campus, and I think this is totally true. The newsroom is home to, I think, about 100, probably over 100 students at this point, and I learned to write, I learned to edit, I learned to discuss my ideas with other students, I learned to write, to make a paper every week, and I was given the responsibility of a free press, which is incredible. And to tie it all together, I guess, I think connected learning has huge implications at Andover in terms of making every space a classroom.
Thank you, thank you. I think I will turn it over to you. Judith, you've done a lot of thinking about connected learning as well, and thank you for surfacing that and helping us to understand the concept and the way it applied in your particular Andover experience. You live connected learning every day. I feel as though as the director of the Addison Gallery, that is some of the framework that you brought to this job. It's some of what you envision for the future, and it is certainly something that the Addison and our other museums, libraries, and archives have been thinking a great deal about. I wonder if you could share a little bit about some of the best use cases, some of the ways that you're thinking about it in terms of the Andover Institute.
Thank you. Sure, absolutely. I think one thing to say about museums in general is I think that we regard them as sites or repositories of innovation and creativity. The objects in collections reflect an artist's self-expression, the way in which he or she has defined him or herself from other artists. So already we feel in that those are hallmarks of what we're looking for as well. I would say that, and the Addison crew are all here, up there and in the back. I would say that connected learning has been absolutely integral to what they've been doing, and it was really a major point of attraction for coming here because my very talented and creative colleagues work constantly with the faculty to make connections between the objects in the collections and the curriculum, not only here at PA, but also in the schools of the Merrimack Valley. And in terms of thinking about what was mentioned earlier by several about a private school with a public purpose, I think my colleagues are doing that every day in working with students who are coming here, not only from the academy, but also from the public schools in Andover and Lawrence. I think one of the things that museum people have constantly in the past few years faced is the question of what is your relevance? Because museums are sort of looked at as an extra. In many ways. And I think for all of us, we can see that the narratives that are told in the images that we hold in our collections, these are almost eternal stories. And one of the thoughts that I had when I was considering this position was the way in which to make everyday events absolutely immediate to the students. And so we've talked about doing a series of little exhibitions that are prompted by events as they happen, and we're calling them for now In the Air. But as the immigration debate has been bubbling up, I've been thinking a great deal about Alfred Stieglitz's image of the steerage. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the image, it shows immigrants on the decks of a ship. And I think that's an image that's over 100 years old now, but I think it makes us think a great deal about the very debates that are happening in the United States now about who's coming to this country, why are they coming to this country, and I think those are the images that we can relate to history lessons, English lessons, and make relevant.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we have a bunch, a variety of different modes and disciplines on the table, and it's exactly what I was hoping for as far as just illustrating the potential of the Institute and supporting ideas across a range of practices. I'd love to turn it to you, Mike, for a moment, our Director of Institutional Research. One of the other pillars or modes that we are particularly dedicated to is the idea of ongoing assessment and learning and challenging ourselves to look at impact, to think about ways that we can assess what we're doing, make it better over time, decide what kind of ideas we want to integrate more fully, and which ones we think we should leave aside. So, Mike, you've done some thinking about this. It would be great to hear your thoughts.
So one of the great things about doing assessment with the Institute, a lot of times where people often think of assessment as this ruler, that there's a measurement of an end state, an end goal. And with the Institute, what opportunity presents itself is basically to roll that ruler into a wheel and roll it into a feedback loop for teachers. And so my partnership or my role, the way I look at it with the Institute, is to build tools for teachers to do three basic things. The first is to build that feedback loop so they can iterate more quickly and use that time that Peter's talked about in as efficient and optimal way as possible to really get at what they're trying to do. The second is to be able to communicate what they found or what they learned in their experiment with their colleagues, both on campus and beyond. And the third is to look at the impact of that experiment and be able to communicate that as well. So I kind of look at this assessment partnership with the Institute as the ability to kind of not measure necessarily goals, but to continually get better at what we were trying to do from the start.
One of the things that we've been talking a lot about is how to kind of customize assessment for the various projects that we're doing. We've got, Jacques building projects. We've got Catherine thinking about experimenting with new tools, looking at databases, developing modules. We have Noah Racklin, who's not here, but is thinking about how to develop learning mindsets and engage our students in that effort. So how do you think about assessment across this range of different disciplines and kinds of projects?
So there's lots of different ways. The basic approach, again, is to build the tool for the teacher that has this idea is to highly match it with the context that they're in. So sometimes it'll be a survey, sometimes it'll be looking at data that we can collect, that technology offers us the ability to collect a lot of data in short amounts of time and really analyze it in short amounts of time. So the technology presents a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of good feedback and good assessment that just comes from discussing things with students and other teachers and analyzing that discussion as well. So I think there's a lot of different ways, technology or non-technical, that can propel the conversations forward.
Great, thank you. So thank you so much, Mike. That's very helpful. Ted, I would love to turn it over to you. I had the pleasure of meeting Ted Dintersmith in the context of John's hacking course. He brings a wonderful background, including a great passion for the future of education, in addition to coming from a venture background. And I feel as though you have a wonderful perspective. When we last met with you, you were encouraging us to share these ideas with other like-minded schools and the power of partnership. I feel as though we've touched on different versions of partnership, but it would be great to hear your thoughts on what the potential impact is and the power of that kind of networked approach.
Sure. And I'm going to start by going off script a little bit because I'm going to watch my credibility in this audience plunge because I didn't go to Andover. And so, but I am here as an outsider to say thank you. And from the first time when I read and heard that the search committee had picked John Palfrey to head Andover going forward, I said to my wife, that's an inspiring and inspired choice. And then when they described to me what they were planning to do with the Andover Institute, I in my car going home, I said, at a time when most institutions would be insular and cautious, here is an institution that's being generous and bold. And as I say, as somebody from outside, I express my heartfelt thank you to all of you for doing it. On the education front, I spent my career in venture capital, and now I spend all of my time on education. And the message I deliver consistently is there is real urgency in the situation. And there's urgency in two dimensions. One is that the pace of technology advance is beyond what anyone can imagine. And we're seeing structured routine jobs disappear in our economy at a blistering pace. And so just when somebody will say, this can't be automated, this can't be replaced, it will be, and it is. And so if you look at that and you look at the skills that kids need to have, the capabilities they need to have coming out of school, it's a whole set of things that our school system today, the school system we still live with, was largely designed and invented to eliminate or crush out of kids. And so if you look at a 125-year-old design that said we want kids prepared for a manufacturing world, we do not want creative, innovative kids, that's what most kids every single day live with in their school experience. And so when I look at this and why I feel there's real urgency, independent of whether you think your kids will be okay or your community will be okay, is that if we live in a country 10 years from now with 50 million chronically unemployed young Americans from all walks of life, and I think every kid is at risk, because I found in venture, oftentimes the incredibly educated kids were more, micromanaged hoop jumpers than creative, bold problem solvers. And the kids that are bored to tears in schools that don't have the kind of faculty that an Andover has, that are trying to learn something in very challenging circumstances, who drop out for reasons that I totally can understand, because their school experience is so boring. As those kids pour into the workforce and have no place to work, we are in real challenges in this environment. And so what I've been excited about all aspects of what you're doing here, but I feel like that it's not coincidental that this is the same school that had Ted Sizer as a head years ago. And if you look back, 1983 was a critical year in the course of education, because there was this almost collision between Ted's view of what education should do, and I apologize because I am a business person, but sort of the business perspective that says if we just test more and use data more, we can improve our school system. And we've gone through 3 decades of testing the bejesus out of kids and believing big data would solve our problems. And the unemployment rate for recent college graduates, under an unemployment rate, is 53%. And so one of the things I've said to them is that just as the top school, every school in the country wants to be Andover. They look up to this institution. They say this is the place that knows and understands what we should be doing. And so the ability to restructure, to rethink the high school experience, and to influence the college admissions experience, which I think is as villainous as any actor in our system, is enormously helpful. And so as I say, I'm excited. I've told them anything I do to help, I'm here. It's a milestone, a reunion for me at college, and my kids' parents stay at the school they're at, and I'm here because this is my first priority. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Ted. And I think you've done a great job in setting our sights on the impact on our students and thinking a lot about the potential of this kind of model, both for our faculty and our students. Janine, maybe turning it back to you, I would love to hear your thoughts on ways that we can continue to engage our students in this kind of process. As I mentioned up front, I often have the sense that they are miles ahead of us as far as thinking about connected learning and figuring out ways to pursue their passions and interests in the context of our program, next to our program, and in all of the networks in which they work. Based on your experience, what is the impact of connected learning for you, for these kinds of concepts for you? What are you bringing to college? What do you see in this first experience for you?
Yeah, is this working? Hi, yeah, okay. I think what I said before, this idea of every space being a classroom was really important for me moving into college. I made the decision to go to school in a city, New York City actually, which is quite big. And I think, I'm so glad that I made that choice, that I went to school not in the suburbs, but rather in this literally a living classroom. So I think connected learning is so important there. And then I guess from the student perspective, students are already doing connected learning or participating in connected learning. The class of 13, I think they've been thinking about ways to improve their education for a very long time. Especially these past few classes, just the past 4 years, the class of 13 brought us feminism as equality. They brought a nascent feminist movement to campus to talk about the ways gender impacts our education, the ways that gender impacts how we lead each other, how we lead the student body. We talked a lot about the co-presidential races. And then the class of 14 and the class of 15 brought us more than just a number to talk about race, to talk about class. It's been really, really inspiring to see so many students care so deeply about the way they participate here. And I think the Andover, or I guess the Tang Institute now, is so important in taking all of that creative, critical energy and turning it into something constructive. So last spring, the Philippian was in the midst of doing kind of a quasi-strategic planning process. We were rethinking the ways that we create a newspaper every week, how we're going to move forward in the digital print media era, and we were really confused and very lost. We recently got an endowment, so we talked to Caroline, and she brought in Amy Selwyn, who is an incredible consultant for a lot of really important media companies, and she helped us map out our entire vision. We're in the process of rewriting, or I guess the Philippian is in the process of rewriting its policies right now for editorial, for reporting. And so I guess that is kind of how I envision the Tang Institute helping students bring their ideas into reality.
Thanks, Janine. I wonder, Catherine, maybe picking up on that, Janine helpfully talked about some of the skills and ideas that are animating the Institute, but also that we're trying to bring into the classroom, and certainly to build on what students are bringing into the classroom. And in many ways, you are thinking about the old and the new, or how do we merge those things in terms of thinking about reading and writing. I wonder if you could share some thoughts along those lines. What are the hopes for how we can bring this conversation to the next stage, particularly in the humanities?
So, here we are right in the middle of fall term, and I mean, the honest truth is that I feel a mixture of hope and anxiety. That
Me too.
when our students bring a lot of honesty, I think, to their experience. We're beginning to think in the English department about, culturally responsive pedagogy, ways that not just acknowledge, but really kind of celebrate the cultural diversity, the kinds of language that students bring from home. Thinking about our relationship to language beyond, printed literature that had access to publishing and distribution traditionally throughout history. At the same time, my students struggle regularly to identify the verb in a sentence, to articulate their observations very clearly and precisely all the time. They're young, they're very, very bright, but they're young, and it takes an enormous amount of time and practice to become elegant and sophisticated at the most basic skills. And so they come to us with a huge diversity of preparation. Some of them have had a kind of training in English class that feels very familiar once they get to Andover. And some of our students come from schooling backgrounds where they've never done anything we're asking them to do before. And, this question of the calendar and the schedule is a big one. We meet them only maybe 3 or 4 days a week, and it's not a lot of time, and their lives are very full. So I think there's a struggle between what are the basic language skills, reading, writing, critical thinking, observation, expression, creativity, that a 14, 15, 16-year-old needs a lot of time and encouragement and opportunity to practice. And then how do we connect them with the larger world where there's a lot more complicated stuff going on out there that we also want them to be exposed to? So I think that's the challenge, right, is how to layer onto the stuff we are already teaching, right? There doesn't seem to be enormous amounts of room to cut out anything that we're doing right now. And yet we sort of have a mantra here at school right now: we're not going to add much new, unless we make an agreement to cut stuff out. So I feel that that's a question I don't really know how to answer. I think it's necessary. A lot of the old is really fundamental language skills, learning how to express yourself, how to find the truth of your own experience, how to find a wide register of language, to communicate clearly in a huge range of situations, and that need for young students never goes away. You know, they're growing into themselves that way.
That's helpful. I think also this idea of seeking to engage students as creators in the classroom and to use technology in the way that you've described, and some of the ideas that you're exploring as a way of bringing those voices out might be one way of bridging the old and the new.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, great, thank you. Jacques, back to you. I think I'd love to come back to this idea of creating a startup here at Andover. What the vision is. You have had this long career in the classroom and also have a startup background. I think that'll touch on some of what Ted was describing. It would be great to hear your thoughts on some of the opportunities we have in front of us by this model, and also some of the challenges we have around trying to create a center, a hub, a mechanism for supporting this kind of work and this kind of experimentation.
Thanks. So I have to admit that the first time that I heard this concept of we're going to have a startup within the school, I sounded fairly incongruous to me. I thought, wow, what environment is this where we can actually have some kind of a startup activity? And I started thinking about really, when I think of a startup, at the risk of oversimplifying what's a really complicated business structure, it strikes me that, you know, in a startup, you need to have access to capital because you need to fund it. You need to have access to expertise, whether it's as a developer or an idea generator, and you need to have access to customers, right? Fundamentally, those are at least three of some of the pillars of what you need to make your business succeed. And it struck me that actually, a school is actually a wonderful environment, very conducive to this kind of opportunity. Now, I'm not going to trivialize the access to capital part. I mean, obviously, you know, funding is a complicated exercise, but certainly a school actually have a structure in place for knowing how to try to fund a nascent business. Access to expertise, it's right here. Maybe not in the form of the technical expertise perhaps needed to solve a particular technology problem, but certainly in the form of experts in the classroom or in the various academic disciplines or otherwise. And then, of course, the customers, in a way, are here. You know, the faculty, the students are all basically in this environment on campus. So to me, I see suddenly a real opportunity in having a startup environment on campus because you have all the elements of a successful startup are already put together, if you want, on right here. Challenges. One of the challenges I can think about is the fact that by its nature, startup is often very disruptive. And disruption is not really a good word in our environment. You know, I always think about the fact that if I go and I put something on the network tomorrow and PANet goes down so that nobody in the school has access to mail or the learning management system, Bill will be happy. But actually, I suspect that I will get a few phone calls very, very quickly about what I did to break this up. So I think one of the challenges, and it's not just purely from a technical standpoint, but one of the challenges is, you know, how do you actually create a structure that can be disruptive, that can be innovative, and yet let it exist within the realm of a structure that needs to just keep moving every day and needs to be absolutely robust and never fail. Mm-hmm. And that there are some technical aspects of that can be answered, but there's also a process flow of how you introduce these technologies or these new innovations in the classroom in the way that facilitate the teaching and does not overly disrupt what needs to happen on a daily basis.
It's a very helpful point, I think, particularly as we think about the technology and the prototyping that we're doing, and then also the ways in which we encourage these projects to, these fellows to share their projects with teachers and to try them out in the classroom. This notion of experimentation is very compelling. It's also pretty scary when you have a group of people who are here, students that are looking for that kind of guidance. And I'd love to bring you into this, Judith. The last time we met, you talked a lot about the ways in which museums are going into the next version, disrupting their model in some ways, and I think also about some of the opportunities for students to kind of feed off of that experimentation, to be brave in similar ways. So it'd be great to hear your thoughts.
Sure, I actually love the word disruption. It's probably the anarchist inside me, but I think it's great, and I think first of all, on one level, there are so many different ways of learning. Some people respond very much to reading, others to listening, others to looking. I happen to be someone who likes to look, and in my colleagues were telling me just the other day that an English class came to the gallery, and my colleague Jamie was warned that, this is a kind of a quiet class, but it turned out that it was quite a talkative class in front of the objects. And so I think that sort of gives us a sense that sometimes we need to disrupt the way in which we're teaching so that others can find their voices. So I think that's a positive. I think in terms of museums and disruption, I think all of us, as I was sort of mentioning earlier, are trying to figure out our relevance. And to some degree, everyone is after the age of the students who are here as the next generation or 2 generations away as our primary visitors. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from the way in which people are looking, the kinds of technologies that they're using to navigate collections, the kind of information that they're after about these objects, and these are the kinds of conversations that we're having in the Addison right now. At the same time, I would say that it's hard to displace the object. And as much technology as we have, there is nothing like looking at the original object in terms of what it can teach us about the way it was made or its materials, et cetera. So I want to be cautious about sort of putting technology ahead of the object itself. That said, any given museum can only show the smallest portion of what it holds. So at the gallery, I think we can show 150 works, maybe 200 works from the collection. There are 17,000 objects. And we can, call on our colleagues and the faculty and students to say, what can you do with these images so that they're more available every single day to the kinds of things that you're talking about, not just on the walls of the gallery, but in your classrooms, in your dorms, anywhere that you're learning, to your point.
Excellent, that's helpful. You make me think about the Knaufel map collection and the ways in which Emma Fry and Niall Blunt and other colleagues have sought to use this incredible collection that is both something that we can hold in our hands and look at, but something that's also represented in some of our academic buildings, that's used by the math department to think creatively about how we look at maps. This notion of writing, looking, and seeing in different kinds of ways brings different kinds of learning to our classroom. And it looks like, Ted, you wanted to get in there.
So whenever I hear the phrase innovation in education, I immediately think oxymoron. And we live in a country where literally there's more money spent on R&D on paper clips than there is on helping understand innovative and powerful ways for kids to learn. And so I'm at the end of a process for the last 2 years of being involved with a feature-length documentary where I sent a film crew to several places, anywhere from graduate school level like the D School or Media Lab or New View at MIT, to undergraduate, Eric Mazur at Harvard's class. If you haven't observed that, it's amazing. Olin College, and then public and private high schools and middle schools. There's some incredible things going on where kids are excited. They will say, I love this place because I don't have any homework to do, but they're up at 1 a.m. doing work on the things that they have a role in defining. And they're learning. Olin has this great phrase of just-in-time education, where you learn as a means to completing something ambitious you care about. But I think the big opportunity for the Andover Institute is to not only promote the things that are being done, but to help spread the rate of dissemination, because that's the other thing that happens is when there are really great things going on, they tend to stay very isolated, and it's not an ecosystem where, as opposed to technology, where if you've got a better social media platform, Facebook annihilates MySpace in a matter of 18 months. Here, you can have a dramatically superior classroom experience, and it can just sit there in one class instead of spread rapidly. So I think that's one of the huge opportunities in front of this organization.
I think you set us up perfectly, I think, for the last round of comments. We have out on the table a number of the early modes that we're thinking about, some of these exciting projects that are being led by our faculty members, and then this idea that all of you touched on in some way or another of partnership. So ways that we want to learn from what's happening in the outside world, where we want to create sustainable partnerships, and we want to bring that oxygen in and learn from it and further impact those groups as well. Just in a last round of comments, it would be great to hear thoughts on what the next opportunities are. Where is the opportunity for impact for the Institute? Touch on the modes that you want to see us engage with, or speak to the partnerships that you want to see. And I think most importantly, if we can think about ways that this is helpful to our faculty and our students, it would be great to hear your thoughts. I'm going to turn to Mike first. You and I had a conversation the other day about the role of assessment in helping to bridge, both helping us internally, but also creating new kinds of partnerships with external folks. It'd be great to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, just to pile on what Ted was talking about, I think the practice of assessment it will lend itself to building bridges with other learning communities, other institutions. I think a lot of these institutions, ideas, everyone has an idea, and then I've seen this before in another conference, so I should attribute it properly, but there's a huge difference between an idea. When you come up with an idea, you're thinking of a thing in the world that you will then make better. And there's a huge gulf between that idea and that end state of a better world, so to speak. And I think the assessment and the sharing of the learned knowledge and building learning communities, that will help bridge or shorten that gulf quite a bit. So.
Sure. Well, one project that we've been talking about a little bit at the Addison takes the collections as a piece, but also is seeking to integrate the map collection and as well as the holdings of the Peabody and the ship collection, the beloved ship collection, and to maybe do a project that explores the quote-unquote discovery of America and its exploration. So that's obviously a huge project that one could consider, and I think it really requires a lot of thought about what the narratives are that are to be presented. Ryan Wheeler and I were talking about, or he brought up to me that, this should incorporate indigenous voices. And so I think, with the help of the faculty, I think it would be really great to talk about the kinds of issues that they're discussing in their curricula, and this isn't only about the 17th and 18th century, or even earlier. This is about what the discovery of America means now, in terms of new technologies, in terms of the kinds of stories that the press is breaking, all kinds of things. So I would love that opportunity to use the Institute for that kind of roundtable, very open discussion.
Jacques, do you have thoughts about the future of the Institute, about the model that we are building, ways in which we can provide additional support for faculty members, bring more people into the conversation?
Yeah, I do actually. And Ted spoke of insularity in the way we actually build something and we share it or not share it right now. And it reminds me a lot actually of the way software development was being done in the dark ages when I had hair, which was about 30 years ago. And at that point, you built a team, you bought technology, you developed the product, you got it out the door, and you hoped it was a success. And actually the world has changed a lot. There are some trends out there which I think bode well for how the Institute can actually involve different constituencies in the development and the sharing of a project who are not necessarily right here on campus. Now communications in the last 30 years and changed in a way where you push a button and you can have video conferencing or any kind of sharing of data, voice, text, or what have you, that's just instantaneous anywhere around the world. You also have an advent in terms of tools, of development tools, where 30 years ago, you had to spend, I remember we spent something like $150,000 to buy tools just for our small development team to get a product out the door. Today, the tools are free if you're doing software development for web, which means actually that a student on our campus or an alum who is working somewhere in Asia or in Europe has access to the same tools and has access to the people to be able to contribute to a given project. So the thing that I actually am perhaps the most excited about in terms of collaboration is we can work with other schools, we can work with our own faculty, we can work with our own students. There's no reason why they can't be contributing to the task, but also we have access to thousands and thousands of experts in their respective fields in the form of our alums. And when you think about giving back to Andover, there are different ways in which you can do that, and I think one of the ways where you can do that is actually contributing to a pet project of yours that the Institute wants to sponsor, and you think you have some expertise to bring about. And with the advent of the way technology in particular has changed and software development has changed, there's no reason why you can't do that and give back to the school, even if you are not one of our faculty members or located directly on campus.
Thank you. I think you raised a really important perspective and something that is a pillar of the Institute as well, our Learning in the World programs and bringing that global perspective in the room. And Catherine, I would love to have you respond to this. I know this is an issue that is near and dear to your heart. You've been involved in the Nice-Worth program for a number of years, and I actually feel as though you have a networked approach in a number of different arenas. You connect with the digital humanities community, your work in India and elsewhere, and it feels as though this kind of open global focus is an important thing that you want to bring into the classroom as well.
It is. I think about this every single day. Sort of one of my little hobby horses right now is to really help my students shift their thinking away from education as performance toward education as learning, right? Because they do tend to be focused on expertise and product, but I think the truth is that learning is an extremely messy and unpredictable process. And our students tend to be risk averse. They feel enormous pressure to appear perfect and perhaps to appear effortless in the production of their excellence. And I think this creates enormous anxiety and self-doubt and pressure that is not healthy for young people, and it doesn't lead to innovation and creativity. So I try to talk to my students a lot about this and what we learn when we travel to India, when we go to other communities and we take the approach of listen first, where humility is the #1 lens, where we know that we're starting from scratch and we're there just to practice having an open mind of generous and big-hearted inquiry, that a lot more joy is possible in discovery and learning, and it is through, I think it's through that lens of open-minded, kind of generous-hearted inquiry that we're able to make sincere and meaningful connections with other people, which gives us the courage to take risks, and it makes us feel part of something that's bigger than our own selfish, ambitious goals of get, and acquire, climb up the ladder and, step on anybody's neck to get what I want. I just think that there's a lot more humanization that happens if you think about the process of discovery and connection with other people as the end goal in itself. And Noah Racklin and I talk a lot about, he and I are both in parallel, unplanned ways teaching the difference between fixed mindset and growth mindset. And this is a countercultural move at Andover. It's a very strange idea to a lot of our students in the worlds that they come from, and it's a difficult shift for them to make. But the promise that Carol Dweck offers us is that of happiness and a different kind of success. So for me, it's worth it, I think.
That's great. And Noah, who's not here, that is the primary focus of his project. So thinking about how to bring those ideas to life here at Andover and to build a curriculum around it, and certainly to build partnership. Janine, I wonder if you have any responses to some of what Catherine has said around encouraging students to experiment, engaging them in this process of growing ideas, hoping for success, but also being comfortable with failure. Do you feel as though those are resonant topics here? Can we use the Institute to help support that kind of learning?
Yeah, absolutely. So the example that comes to mind immediately is this idea of wellness, right? There's so much talk about it on campus right now. The school co-presidents, Rebecca Sommer and David Gutierrez, they ran their entire platform was about wellness and mental health and improving that at Andover. The Philippian editorial board writes editorial after editorial every single week about how Andover students are too stressed, ways we can improve that, alleviate that. So there are a lot of students thinking about mental health and wellness right now. And I think Ms. Tousignant was so right in saying that often we are very, very competitive. We are very talented at compartmentalizing and kind of doing classes and extracurriculars and sports and not really thinking or reflecting about it. And I think the Tang Institute now could be really, really useful in kind of bringing all of this good energy together and bringing students together to really think constructively about how to improve this place. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Ted, I'm going to give the last word to you. You have brought this wonderful perspective on both the power of networks and also the implication of these kinds of skills for the future of our students, for the future of our school. It would be great to hear your thoughts on where we should go next. I also feel as though you convey a wonderful sense of urgency around these kinds of issues.
So I visit a lot of schools now, and the thing that often happens is when I talk to teachers or school heads, they'll say to me, but somewhat in the same tone of voice, you might say, it might rain next Thursday. They will say, you know, it's amazing. You know, a kid that gets really interested in something can become an expert on it in a matter of days. And I say back, doesn't that have profound ramifications for the way we think about organizing learning experiences? And so you look at things that are out there, and you look at what these kids are capable of. And I've been lucky because John's been willing to put up with me, and I've been able to sit in with some of his students in the hacking class. But I also visit kids in schools where most of the world would say this is a write-off. I mean, schools that have 25% graduation rates. You engage with kids on something they care about. Give them a reason to learn something. Those kids are capable of amazing things. And if you start to really value resourcefulness and creativity and tenacity, instead of breadth of vocabulary or how fast you can factor polynomials, you start to see these inner city kids in Newark doing quite remarkable things. And so I think when you look at the future of our country, and I said urgency, I said concern, but I'm also saying optimism, because I think we are really fortunate to have a future generation of kids that have incredibly well thought through set of values. They're not as materialistic, and they are capable of doing amazing things. And so what I'm really excited about in terms of here is that for far too long, education's been co-opted by if we just test more and hold these darn lazy teachers accountable to, for student performance on, increases in performance on standardized tests, that will fix things. And instead, having a strong voice for an aspirational and inspirational vision of what education can be, that could be transformational for our country.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you, all of you, for your work on the Institute and also for participating in this conversation. I'll come back to that idea of the Institute as a platform. As you can see and understand from all the ideas that are out on the table, we want to be a laboratory for these ideas. We want to support them and help to grow them, but there is no shortage of creative ideas and incredible teachers and students at this school. And so I'm so excited to have a role in helping to promote those efforts and to grow them going forward collaboratively with all of you. So please join me in thanking our panelists, and thank you all. Oh, and there is a break right now. We have about 20 minutes. There should be snacks out there, and I hope you'll come back around 3:10. Thank you so much.